router first, right? And then if we go in, we see some congestion, right? And then we just locally, we can just rip them out, right? So the limitation of this is sometimes you have a net that go over a macro, right? Or go to a channel. Then rip and reroute usually not gonna fix it because rip and reroute only look at locally, and it can't see beyond the other side. So it's never, you keep trying over and over again, and it's more likely it's not gonna fix it, right? So that's why we need to understand how certain the way the router works, right? So sometimes we have to go back and say, well, we have to reroute the global route for a certain net, right? So you get a different route, right? So, but again, it's everything is a trade-off, right? You want the router to run quickly, right? And then come up with the result, right? You want to sit there and keep thinking forever and then come up with the best result, right? So this slide essentially talk about essentially the thinking behind the router, right? So it's like, well, come in, do it, just route, right? And let's see, is it good, right? If it's good, then we done, right? If it's not, right, we have a lot of violation, then yeah, try to fix it locally, right? So, and of course, the different here is different tool, different setting gonna come in here, right? It's not all the initial routing is gonna be the same, right? We look at so many different uh, algorithm how to route certain net, right? And then the setting that you can set, you want to do timing driven routing, you want to do the crosstalk aware routing. So many things that come, as an input to the router. So the router has to consider all of that, right? Okay, so let's see. Okay, so what do we get when we run through the global route? So usually we look at the congestion, right? So that's how we determine whether what's the chance that we gonna be able to route this design, right? So every tool has a different report, but usually it's breakdown into layer, right? So you look at the column here, first column here. So for this report, we see 6 layer, right? So, and every single layer, we break it down in terms of how bad is the congestion, right? So here, so what they call overcon here is a over congested, right? So they're gonna go in and they're gonna count how many global cell are, are over, right? So this column is just 1 or 2. So of course you expect these gonna be a big number, right? Here. And then you don't want so these gonna higher number. That mean that's you need like how many additional track. So certainly you want all these to be 0, right? So in this case, just by looking at this, the M2 seem to be worse, right? So we have really bad congestion on M2 here, right? So it's not just on one or two additional track. Let's go even up to 7 or 12, right? That means something. I mean, this number is not too big. It's about 100, so it could be some local area that we need to look at. But if you look at all of these layer, the the layer M2 kind of like stand out, right? It's very bad compared to the other layers. So uh, right. So M2 and M4. So by looking at, so there's many things you can, try to read from this report, right? So let's say M2 and M4 usually they lead the same direction, right? So by looking at here, you say, well, more likely, yeah, either vertical or horizontal. You have trouble with that, right? So 1 and 3 and 5, not too bad, right? But 2 and 4 look are the worst, right? So and 2 and 4 are the same direction, right? So it could be that your chip, the aspect ratio may be not ideal, right? So maybe your vertical channel is a little bit, you need more, or horizontal, either way, right? So just by looking at this, it gives you a lot of idea, right? So that's, and then you may come up, you may thinking, just can I just tell by looking at this number and determine whether I can be, the chip can be routed, right? So it's pretty hard. So it's depend on very much you have to analyze it, right? So certainly if you have like 5%, then probably it's not going to be routable, right? So it's around 1%, yeah, maybe not, right? So but this is two, yeah. So let's see the overall, yeah, one little bit more than one. So I think it's right at the borders. So certainly we want to keep it below one, right? So for majority of the time. So so this one way to look at it is by looking at this number, right? So it tell you per layer and how bad it is, right? So by looking at this, M2 is the worst, and followed by M4, right? And that is sometimes it kind of makes sense, right? So usually the vertical channel is they try to use M2 and M2 run out, right? So they're gonna try to use M4, right? So usually those the same direction get worse at time because they have to jump up, right? So let's try to use M2. M2's out, so they try to use M4, right? So another chip you might see M3 and M5, right? Because they try to use M3 and they use out. So they have to jump up to M5 to try to use the same thing. So usually M1 is kind of like not used realistically. It's not really for routing, the long wire, right? Because your standard cell use up most of the M1 already. So okay, so I will try to do one more, and I think we're gonna take a break after this. Okay, so this we look at that table, but it's all way better to look at, visually where are the congestion, right? Because that table will only give you the number, right? It doesn't tell you where it is, right? It doesn't give you that, the is that global? Is that happen at certain corner, right? Is that next to a memory? So you want to look at, the congestion, the, the congestion map, right? To see where things are, right? So you certainly don't want to see red, right? Red is just bad, right? You want to see mostly blue, a few green, a few, black, right? The color can be different. So, but essentially, red and yellow or orange is just bad, right? So you have to analyze, you have to look at both, right? So look at the congestion table, and then you look at this, right? And then try to combine them together, right? See, oh, if the number you look in previous table is really bad, but you go here, you look, it just happened, let's say just tiny, everywhere is mostly blue, but it's like just a few localized area here, and it's maybe not too bad, right? So those are the things that you need to analyze and see, is that the congestion is local? Is that over the standard cell area, right? Um, is that something to do with the macro placement, right? Yeah, maybe the macro placement is not optimal. The channel is probably not optimal. Uh, those sort of things. You have to figure that out, right? So, okay. So I think it's time to take a break.
So Tian, when we get back, can we do two things? One is I'm going to go over the final assessment, um, just in
Okay.
case people didn't read them yet. So to open up for questions. And then if you can think of a way to explain all the priorities, right? Because all these track assignment, global routing, it will give priorities to certain signals, to certain optimization, timing first. So think of how the tool. I actually don't pay attention to all these things, but if you have insights on how the tools give priorities for different signals, that would be good to mention. Right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So we're gonna be back in 5 minutes. So
Love you
Dave,
guys.
you're gonna
Dave.
create the counter. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I had my microphone disconnected, but yes, counter's going. 5 minutes.
All right. All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome back from the break.
Okay, so if you want to start with what you have.
I can do that. Let me share the screen. Screen number 3. Ok, mọi người thấy cái screen không ạ? Ok, có câu hỏi Nguyễn Văn Duyên. I can see in the syllabus 26 we have final project announcement. Should we start working on project by that time or wait until 14.5? Ok, câu hỏi thì sẽ được trả lời. Cảm ơn Nguyễn Văn Duyên đã hỏi. Chỉ có một câu hỏi thôi. Thì mọi người thấy cái share screen chưa hả? Thấy cái project chưa ha? Hay là chưa thấy? Hay làm lại thì phải. New share thấy không ta? Có thấy cái syllabus không ạ?
Yes. Dạ thấy.
Ok. Thì bây giờ là chúng ta đang ở tuần này, tuần thứ 18. Thì ngày 26 là từ cuối tuần sau, thứ sáu tuần sau là mình sẽ có cái chi tiết về cái dự án cuối cùng. Thì cái đó là trong thời điểm này là mọi người sẽ biết dự án nó sẽ về cái gì và cần làm những cái gì. Thì để trả lời câu hỏi của Nguyễn Văn Duyên là các học viên bắt đầu làm trên cái dự án bắt đầu lúc đó được rồi, nhưng mà sẽ không có làm hết cho đến khi mà mình học xong tới cái hết phần routing thì và phần export nữa, tức là còn mấy tuần nữa đúng không, sau đó sẽ học mấy tuần về export và routing. Nhưng mà rồi cái tuần mà ngày 15 tháng 4 và 17 cái tuần đó là mình sẽ có gọi là office hours, tức là lúc đó là từ đây đến trở đi thì ai có muốn hỏi gì thì cứ hỏi, nhưng mà mình không có office hour thì cứ hỏi theo các người phụ giảng trong cái nhóm của mình. Còn mà nếu những câu hỏi nào hóc búa mà hoặc là muốn chia sẻ với lớp thì nhờ các phụ giảng, nhờ các giáo sư phụ giảng thì đem vào trong lớp học để cho mọi người có thể chia sẻ và trả lời được đầy đủ hơn nếu cần. Cái mục đích bây giờ là từ đây đến đi thì nói chung cái dự án cuối cùng là sẽ học sinh sẽ được đưa ra một con chip. Thì con chip đó thì học sinh sẽ đi nguyên quá trình từ import đến floor planning đến placement, clock tree synthesis, routing. Thì sẽ có những cái đòi hỏi, thì mỗi học viên là tự làm riêng, có thể là bàn tính với nhau, học hỏi với nhau trong nhóm. Nhưng mà khi mà nộp để mà đơn giản hóa việc mà chấm điểm thì mỗi học viên đều có một cái bài nộp riêng. Còn mà nếu mà nộp chung thì rất là khó chấm điểm từng cá nhân, và chấm điểm tập thể mà chia ra từng cá nhân thì rất là khó. Thì như vậy là tới đây là học viên sẽ có những cái chi tiết mà bắt đầu là thực hiện cái dự án của mình liền tại chỗ. Và trong cái tuần ngày 14 và 15 là sẽ có mình không có giảng nữa, nhưng mà những cái ngày đó học viên cũng vẫn vô lớp, thì có thể làm chia ra nhiều nhiều nhóm để mà học viên cần câu hỏi gì cụ thể trước cái ngày cuối cùng là ngày hồi này thiếu cái chỗ là project due. Xin lỗi, project due là ngày 19. Thì ok, tức là ngày 12 giờ khuya ngày 19 giờ Việt Nam là project due, sau đó là không có cập nhật hóa được nữa. Thì những cái câu trả lời đều là nằm trên mạng, dùng theo cái Google Quiz mà mọi người đã từng đã và đang dùng. Thì cái đó giúp chúng ta chấm điểm một cách tự động nhiều. thì từ đây đến lúc ngày 19 là từ ngày 26 đến ngày 19 là học viên có thể làm bất kỳ lúc nào, và muốn hỏi gì thì cứ hỏi. Nhưng mà đối với một số học viên thì có thể là biết hết rồi, nhưng mà một số học viên nếu mà không có theo kịp và không có cơ hội hỏi về những cái mục mà trước đây á, thì bây giờ là time to catch up, để mà bây giờ là bắt đầu là mình chạy đua, mình ráng mình hỏi cho nó đầy đủ để mà có thể làm được cái dự án cuối cùng. Thì và sau khi cái tuần đó rồi là mình sẽ có trong cái office hours này, nếu mà không có nhiều câu hỏi thì mình cũng có thể review, mình có thể ôn lại những cái bài học đã làm. Nhưng mà ngày 21 là cái ngày mình đặt ra thêm một cái nữa là cái review cuối cùng, để mà tất cả mọi người đều nắm vững những cái key takeaways, để mà bắt đầu học làm cái bài thi lý thuyết. Bài lý thuyết là được làm ở tuần ngày 24 tháng 5 này. Thì ngày 24 tháng 5 này là học viên cần phải vào lớp học, và cần phải vào 3 cái địa điểm, và cuộc thi này sẽ là cuộc thi gọi là à, trực 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 tiếp, và không có thể nào làm trên mạng được. Thì sẽ có giờ, sẽ có người coi thi. Và cái tuần cuối cùng thì thứ 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 ba là mình sẽ ôn lại những cái gì mà những câu trả lời của các dự án, hoặc là những câu trả lời của những cái bài thi, để cho học viên nắm vững thêm một lần nữa trước khi tốt nghiệp. Thì cái tuần lễ cuối cùng là mình sẽ có à, à, gọi là ăn mừng lễ cuối khóa, và trao chứng chỉ, về cũng có thể là trao cái quà gì đó cho những người học sinh xuất sắc, thì chúng tôi chưa biết được. Chỉ có vậy thôi, không biết mọi người có hỏi gì không, về cái nội dung của thi, hoặc là những cái câu hỏi gì liên quan đến cái việc đánh giá cuối cùng không? Mọi người hiện tại có thấy có những khó khăn gì không, hay là tất cả đều là straightforward hết?
Ừ.
Sao ạ?
Dạ là mình làm cái project rồi mình nộp project xong rồi mình có thuyết trình về cái project đó không?
Không, lần đầu thì dự định là như làm project với lại từng nhóm thì sẽ có thuyết trình, nhưng mà vì làm từng cá nhân, thành thử mình có rất nhiều học viên, thành thử không có thể thuyết trình được. à, Cũng có thể là lựa một số để thuyết trình, nhưng mà nghĩ là cái thời giờ được sử dụng một cách hữu hiệu hơn nếu mà mình có thể là ôn lại, hoặc là thảo luận về những cái đề tài, à, à, gọi là những cái gì mà quan trọng trong những cái kỳ thi này, thì cái đó là cái lần cuối cùng này nè, tức là tuần cuối cùng này mình có thể là mình ôn lại những cái gì quan trọng à, trong những cái câu hỏi, và trong những cái chi tiết về làm dự án. Còn Trần Hiện Đức hỏi where the netlist and the library come from the final project. Thì lần đầu là chúng tôi dự định là làm một cái RISC-V, một một con chip dựa trên cái RISC-V và Skywire 130. Nhưng mà trong quá trình làm thì cái uh, cái cách người ta release nó không có được, gọi là không được là dễ dàng cho cái việc mà mình cài đặt trên cloud. Do đó thì chúng tôi sẽ làm sẽ sẽ làm một cái test case mà đến từ trong cái nội dung của Cadence. Thì trong tương lai những khóa học sau và những cái gọi là engagement kế tiếp, thì hy vọng những học viên sau khi lớp học này cũng có thể là cùng cũng có thể tham gia được ở những cái hoạt động trong tương lai. Thì lâu dài là chúng tôi muốn là open source, chúng tôi muốn dùng những cái open design giống như RISC-V và những cái open PDK giống như là Skywater, và sẽ tham gia xin ngân quỹ để mà mình làm những con chip. Khi mà cái nhóm học viên tiếp tục tham gia với nhau thì cũng có thể có cơ hội định nghĩa một con chip và làm, và để đưa ra sản xuất ở Skywater với một cái MPW. Thì đó những cái hướng lâu dài. Còn bây giờ thì tại cái lớp pilot này, lớp thí điểm này thì tổ chức cũng rất là gấp rút, thành thử không có đủ thời giờ để mà có những cái tài liệu như ý muốn được. Ok, nếu không có câu hỏi gì thì Thiện you can have the class back. Cảm ơn mọi người. Nếu mà có câu hỏi gì thì cứ bỏ trên cái stream ở trên classroom, thì có gì chúng tôi sẽ trả lời.
Vậy anh Phiếu là mấy em là có mấy tuần để làm?
Để coi lại cũng khá nhiều. Để coi share lại
More
nha.
than 3 weeks.
Yeah. Tức là ngày 24 tháng 6 rồi, 26 tháng 4 là bắt đầu là biết. Thì có 1 tuần, cái này là 1 tuần, 2 tuần, 3 tuần. 3 tuần. Dạ, 3 tuần 2 ngày. Thì nhưng mà tại vì mới vẫn còn mấy cái lab cuối cùng, nhưng mà khi mà cái tuần cuối cùng là các em có 24 tiếng đồng hồ để làm lab. Thì tuần này mình sẽ yêu cầu có nhiều máy nhiều hơn ở trên cloud để cho mọi người đều có nhiều thời giờ để làm. Thì 2 tuần này mình không học, thành thử học viên có thể là dùng cái thời giờ lab để mà làm cho dự án của mình. Ok. Alright. Cảm ơn mọi người.
Okay, thank you. Okay, guys, so let's come back to the class. Có ai có câu hỏi gì không? Let's see. Okay, let me setting up my slide again. Just give me a second here. So I do see some question here. Okay. Normally, what lower matter signal net used for routing? Oh, okay. So let's see. I think he's asking what lower layer matter signal net used for routing. Yeah, I mean, so in CTS, right? So remember, Bat was talking about if you look at the CTS, usually we come up with this what I call a non-default rule. And if you look at the clock tree, just like a tree, right? You have the trunk. and you have the leaps, right? So and then NDR, usually you define the trunk to be higher layer, right? Let's say, 5 or 6, right? Um, and then you go down to 3 and 4. So for signal route, very much you use all of those layers as well, right? And except for the usually the AP layer, right? The top two most layer, those are usually reserved for the power distribution. So, and all the layers will be used for routing, right? And so the tool gonna know, which layer is best, right? So,
One thing to add to that is usually the standard cells, right? It uses metal 1, and some standard cells use both metal 1 and metal 2. So typically those layers, if they use in the standard cells, then they're not, you can turn them on, but they're not very useful.
yeah, some people, yeah, because yeah, some people limit, right? Just say, well, what's the point of using M1, right? So they just block it out completely. So, but it's
But not me, not me. I
yeah,
turn them
I
on,
mean,
right?
yeah, I use M1 too because sometimes cell placed in a cluster, right? And things, some net are shared within the cluster. So if cell placed one next to the other, and they can just use a piece of M1 to connect those two pins, that's actually pretty good instead of blocking. If you're blocking M1, then it has to go to M2 and then via down, right? Um, so it's kind of like the low hanging fruit, right? Why not use it if it's there, right? So, okay. So let me go back here. So Few, I think you mentioned about so I did not prepare for that, but I think I try.
You,
So
you could delay it until you do detailed routes, but at some point we need to give the
right.
student a strategy,
So
right? When you turn on crosstalk, when you fix hold, when you fix DRV. So there's a strategy in terms of using, it's only 2 commands, right? But strategy on how you go about fixing everything and not fixing everything, and do in sequence so that you can close timing easily. So people like you and but with all the practical knowledge, I think it's useful to share with them the strategy, right? The flow.
oh, I see. In
Yeah,
terms of time enclosure, right? Okay.
exactly. Right. Timing closure is
Okay.
the most challenging. And what do you do if you worry about power, right? Even though it's really a basic class, but they need to know the fundamentals, the basic flow, and because they're going to rely on that to do the final project, right? We're going to give them some challenging speed requirement, and they need to do multiple iterations, and, with different strategy to close timing, etc. Right? So it's good to have that knowledge.
Right. So for me, usually I wait until detail route, and we do the timing optimization, or post route optimization after detail route, right? So
Yeah, but the tool does look at timing during global route as well. But I think the best would be on the detail route. Right. So
Right.
yeah, you can delay until then.
And I think, yeah, you were talking about, so during the break, I kind of like look at, I think, so we look at, let's see, so we mentioned that by default during global
Hey,
route.
sir. I think you forgot to share the screen.
Oh, okay. I forgot. Hold on. Sorry about that. That's a good one. Okay. I thought I did. Okay. Okay. Hold on. Okay. You see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So we talk about, actually, let me move my slide to here. So we did talk about the importance of, having the minimum street, right? Essentially minimize the wire length. But when you run the timing ribbon, the minimum uh, wire length may be not the correct, the optimum, net for all the critical path, right? So one way, say, is that instead of having, let me turn this on. Yeah, instead of like looking at the whole net and then try to minimize it, right? So it's a trade-off between the wire length and the timing, right? So say, well, so instead of that, they have some cost function, right? So everything has to be a cost function. So one way you can think of this, right? So previously, it just connect all these pin together, right? But consider this is your source, right? And then if the net 5 is your uh, critical net, then, right, it's kind of like you split them out, you make them independent, right? So the net no longer has the minimum wide length, but net 5 is kind of like, you can optimize it, right? So what they try to do here is, right, so look at it one way. So multiple way is associated with the cost function. So they look at the net topology and selecting which one is good for wiring, which one is good for the critical timing path, right? So those are the things, right? That's why they say, you come in to do a quick route, and then if timing driven routing, then they look at the whole set of the critical net, right? And say, well, is there I need to reroute some of these, right? So change the topology of these net to make it better, right? So the wire length no longer the number one priority for those net, right? So the delay is a priority. So it's just a different cost, right? So, and same thing with the crosstalk as well, right? So previously you say, well, I want to the causing crosstalk. So now say, well, if I'm in a critical net, I don't want I can reroute it, the net can be longer, but the crosstalk effect is much less, right? So any question? Okay, so let's continue. So we was looking at this, right? So congestion. So now what you do with congestion, right? Because that's the thing with routing is that we add the last state, right? So there's not a whole lot you can do, right? So what you can do is you analyze congestion, and hopefully you understand is first is the problem is that the congestion is global, right? If the congestion is global, that means you're in trouble, right? So essentially, it's everywhere. Either your die is too small, your cell density is too high, right? It's everywhere. Essentially, you have to go back, right? Either increase the um, die size or lower your performance, right? So initially, let's say you create the dies with a certain performance in mind, but then later on say, well, let's try to squeeze it, right? Make it faster, and when you do that, increase get count, increase area, right? Density go up, and to a certain point, its routability is not possible, right? So those three things kind of like go together, right? So performance, power, and area, right? So you want to look at three at the same time. There's no way you can try to push one so hard. It's going to affect the other one. So, but hopefully you did a good job during placement and CTS before you come to routing, right? So because if the problem is so bad, you should have seen it during CTS, right? So it's very unlikely that you're gonna say you have perfect congestion after CTS, and all of a sudden you come into routing, and the congestion is so bad, right? So usually congestion is okay, but timing is bad. Then it's kind of like it's okay. But if the congestion during CTS is really, really good, and then you come to routing and then congestion is really bad, usually that's not the case, right? So if the congestion was pretty good after CTS, and then you come into routing, you have some congestion, and usually that's locally, right? So, and then hopefully we can look at that and try to understand what's wrong, right? Did we miss something? Miss some routing blockages? Could we, do the uh, placement blockages? We can do cell padding, those other things, right? So that you don't have to go back all the way and kind of like increase the die size, right? That's the last thing you want to do, right? So you want to go back and say with the reasonable density, somehow you want to ship or even out the congestion, right? So if you look at the cell placement, the cluster or the cell placement, it's kind of like get pulled together, right? One is like locally it's so high, and then you try to understand is something wrong, right? Is that that's cluster logic? Is that over constraint somehow? Did we miss some of the set full pad, right? So everywhere on the chip is kind of like empty, but then you notice that a corner of the chip, all the cell kind of clump together, right? That's just not right. So those are the things that you want to look at and see, is that expected, right? So ideally, you want the cell to group together, calculate by function, right? So if you have a certain memory over that corner, whatever logic that talk to that memory should get pulled close to that, right? But if you don't have the placement of those macro, in the right grouping, then potentially a certain group of standard cell, maybe right in the middle, right, get pulled by different set of macro that can cause trouble as well, right? It's just very much create additional white routing for you, right? So the sometimes hopefully the routing congestion is something local, right? That you can say, well, I have some huge macro that the tool just doesn't know, right? I put that macro against the edge of the block, and the tool just try to squeeze some of the route, right? Sometimes it's just like 10 or 20 route try to go through a channel, and then it couldn't get out, right? So hopefully it's just local to that channel. Then say, oh, you come in, you add let's say the routing blockages. You can block it all the way, or you can do a partial, right? That's the routing blockage. You can do both ways, kind of similar to placement blockages. You can do percentage, right? So and another one is sometimes you have a channel, right? So usually channel is just one direction, right? And as we know, the way that the layers has the preferred direction, right? So usually it's like they cross, right? One and two, one and three, and two and four. So if we know that within certain channel, we use up all of the vertical, and then the horizontal we're not using it. So we can actually change that layer right over that channel to be vertical instead of the horizontal, right? So essentially say, well, I want to use, this M4, by the prefer M4, let's say go horizontal. I can change that M4 to be vertical, right? So essentially you use M3 and M4, whatever the direction it is, that prefer to be non-refer, right? So, and the other one, I think, Bart already went through. So we can, if cells that lump together, we can do cell padding, right? Or cell density. We can add. So the two ways you can control it, right? So you can add globally. So just give the whole area a certain percentage, right? Not to go over a certain percentage, like 50%. Or if the issue is routing with the pin count happen to be on a certain specific cell, then you can say, well, I need to target these cells, right? The complex cell with the high pin count density, and I'm gonna, add some space around that. So you can do with the cell padding for those calculate target, cell spacing. So, and of course, if you didn't do the turn on the congestion aware placement, maybe it's time to do that, right? So Okay, so I think I'll just go.
Hey, can I say something additionally to your last slide?
Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the question to the students, is it possible you still have congestion even though your overall congestion can be very low, say 50%, but you still have congestion, right? Can touch on that, but I want to make sure that the point uh, being understood, very well, because it's really all up is all about the timing closure. So we gave you an example of a DSP earlier, right? Say DSP have like a multiply and accumulate, where your data come from the RAMs, 2 X and Y, and then you have a coefficient RAM, and then you have the multiply accumulate logic in between. So say you have an overall utilization of 50%, overall, but to meet timing, the tool really need to place cells, really close to these, coefficient RAM and the 2 RAMs. It has to be clumped to here to meet timing, because if the cells are here, the RC delays will kill the timing. So it is the tool's forced to just clunk all the cells in here, and why over out here you can have as low as 10%, but it doesn't matter, because to meet timing you have to have local congestion here. So I just want to make sure you understand the importance of floor planning and being able to close timing early on during the placement process. During the placement process, your CTS is estimated, right? RC is estimated. The clock trees, skews, and latency are estimated. After CTS, you have clock trees, clarity, but you're still estimating RCs with global routing. And then early on, you have global routing. Congestion analysis is still global routing, meaning track assignments and everything. It's not actual route. So at each step, you need to be, if you're not accurate, then you have to be conservative, meaning that during the time that you're estimating the RC, the resulting RC has to be worse than your final RC. Otherwise, you have trouble closing timing at the end. So it's a very important concept to understand. Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Phil. Right, so I think we did talk about right, so the congestion and timing, right? So usually the congestion get worse when we try to do timing driven routing, right? Or even placement, right? Because they tend to pull cell closer together, right? That's how you reduce the wire and the delay for the critical net, right? So another thing about the SDA or timing is that usually you look at if you look at the design and you look at all the timing pad. So usually the critical timing pad is just a minor, it's a minute portion of the timing space. Right? Usually most of the timing pad can be timing with no issue, but that's just a few, right? Just a few right at the edge. That is very difficult to meet timing, right? So we look at I think Bat already mentioned there's two number that it's kind of like go hands in hands, right? You look at the worst timing slack or negative slack, and you look at the WNS, right? That's the worst negative slack, and you look at TNS, which is the total, right? So if you have a few very very bad negative slack, it's that hard to close timing, or you have a lot, right? The total negative stack is so large, even though the worst negative slack is not that much, right? So usually the number of the negative slack, that's actually, it's much harder when you have so many pad that failing, right? So usually it's spread all over. If you just have a few, so even though the slack is worse, the tool can actually focus on that and prioritize them and make them actually close timing on those, right? So okay, so let's see next here. So I think this, Caroline, I very much reiterate why we need to do these. So the reason we employ or we add routing blockages is we understand where the signal should or should not go, right? So if you look at a certain area, say no, if the router going to come in here through this channel, it's not going to be able to get out. So we're going to add the routing blockers, limit the number of routing resource for the channel, right? So so the idea is, yes, you helping the tool to ship the routing somewhere else, right? To kind of even out the congestion, right? So, and it's good for SI, right? And sometimes usually it doesn't happen a lot, but we have some macro that it just like have, it's what I call physical only macro, that when it has nothing to do with timing, it has nothing to do with uh, logically, but it's something to do with the manufacturer, right? So say they're gonna come in and place that macro on top of the routing area. Then we have to go in, block it out, right? So and then later on we can go in and place that as macro. So it's just like a placeholder. So those are the things that you can do, right? You reserve the space for future cell, or early on, um, when you don't have everything, right? Some macro is there, but the abstract is kind of missing, but certain layer gonna be used, right? So you can go in, put blockages there, right, to preserve the space for later on. You don't want to, in early stage of the design, you say, well, I'm not blocking anything, and then the router has plenty of routing resource, and you route with no issue, right? But later on, when the design is more mature, more macro coming in with more metal in it, and then you start seeing the congestion, right? So you don't want to do that, right? You want to err on the calculate wrong side. So you want to overestimate the resource that the macro going to be using, right? So you want to try to be, as precise as possible, estimating what those macro are going to be using later on. So. And so this one, yeah, I was talking about this. So we do this. We do this a lot when we have so many macro placing in groups, right? And we know the routing need to go through these channels to connect to the macro, right? So the vertical channel and the horizontal channel, they're not the same, right? So sometimes we have to tell the tool, hey, don't route it this way. I'm gonna route it the other way. Use the non-default. So the tool gonna be able to reuse that for our advantage, right? So very much we double the number of resource either for horizontal or vertical channel, right? Because the other direction we don't need it anyway, right? Because in channel you go straight, up and down, or you go left and right, right? So I think we have a question here. Okay. How's the partial routing blockage is calculated? Okay. Yeah, I think if you think of because this is different from the placement, right? Placement is area, so it's easier to visualize. It's like it's 100%, and now if for placement 100%, then that area can be used 100% for placement. If you change that to 50%, mean that only half of that, the density wise, only 50%. But routing is different. Routing, you have to think of the number of available track, right? So if I'm going to come in and I place a routing blockage of 50%, that means whatever the routing track, the number of routing track I have right now, is going to be reduced by half, right? So say I look at, so usually you can go in and you look at the channel, and you can actually select